Welcome to Machine Learning Lesson 2.2. In this video, we're going to explore the kind of information we can look at when it comes to data science and machine learning, and also how to select different pieces of information from it. So let's get to it. So as review, Colab is a Google application. So if you go to Google and search for Colab, the first link that comes up is the application, which exists at colab.research.google.com. Let's click on that. We'll click on New Notebook. And again, this is stored in your Google Drive. And in this video, I'll definitely show you where all that's being stored. Let's go ahead and rename this. We'll do Machine Learning Lesson 2.2. And if you recall, this is an interactive environment where we can type code and then run code immediately. On the left side, we do have the option to load files, but as we saw, if we load files this way, they're not going to be available to us the next time we open our notebook. So it's better for us to pull the information from the internet. But before we do that, we have to import our library. So let's do import pandas as PD. Again, as PD allows us to write PD instead of pandas. And if you recall from the first video, we can do pd.read CSV, which will allow us to read a CSV from, let's say, an internet source. It actually will also let you read a file locally. So it's a very powerful function. So throughout this video series, I've provided, and I will add to these data sets, a lot of data sets on Replit that we can use. So you got to pull the base link, which is this, ML resources Rene Castro.replit.co. So you're going to pull that, and we're going to look at the cars one. So we're going to put that here. We're going to paste it. Cars.csv. Let's go ahead and run it. We don't get any errors. Good thing. Let's go ahead and put df so we kind of check out the information. And what you see here is, we get a lot of information about prices, brand, model, year, mileage. We're going to work with this data set later down the road in a future video. We're going to try to predict the price of a car based off maybe one of these other features. Again, just to kind of give you a little motivation for where we're heading to this. When it comes to data science, we typically will look at one column versus another column for all the existing rows that we have. So Panda makes it very convenient for us to look at information via columns. So let's do that. Let's say we want to look at just the prices. So I can do df, which is our variable to represent our data. And we could do price. And you can see here we get all the prices for all the cars. And from looking at the previous code block, we see that we have almost 2,500 cars in here with 9 different features. So very easy. Just put dot and the column name. There is another way that we can do this. So we can do df bracket. Instead of the dot operator, we're going to use the bracket. Price. I'm going to bring that up. So you got 2 ways of getting to the column. You can either put the dot operator and get the column, or you can do bracket and get the column. So you might say, well, what's the benefit of one over the other? If you had a column name that had a space in it, you wouldn't be able to use this. So for instance, if title did not have the underscore, had a space instead, you can't write this. This is a syntax error in Python. So that wouldn't work. Put the prices back. But if you use the bracket notation, again, notice it's inside quotes. Spaces are valid inside of quote. So you could select the column that way. Another reason for using the bracket notation is, I'm going to do it up here. And oops, go in front. Let's say we want to create a variable called features, and we want the features to be price. Well, guess what? I can do this now. I can use that variable with the bracket notation. You couldn't do that with the dot notation because at that point it's going to look for a column called features. It doesn't exist. But using the bracket notation, it's going to see this as a variable and simply replace it. I'm going to do one more thing. Let's create a variable here. Let's say prices equals, and let's just simply display it. Again, just as proof of, notice we just used a bunch of variables. We're still getting the same information. Again, if it's something simple, use the dot operator. But if it ends up being something you want to do more sophisticated, or the fact that you can't because it has a space or some other illegal character, then you have to use the bracket notation for grabbing a column. Now, if you notice, this information looks a little bit different than this information. Let's check out why. So Python gives us a function called type, which lets us explore the data type of a variable. So let's look at type of prices. What are we actually getting? And what you'll notice, you're getting something called a series. And this comes from Pandas. This is an object. So think of a series as one set of information. And this is just the prices. Just as comparison, let's look at our df, which represents this information. Let's see what data type that is. So let's do type df. And what you'll notice that you get something called a data frame, hence the name of the variable df. Think of a data frame like a table. It's more than one piece of information. Now, it doesn't have to be all the information. You'll notice that any kind of subset of this would also be a data frame. And that's what we're going to look at in this next code block. So we saw how we can grab one column. What if we wanted to grab more than one column? So let's say we do my data equals. So we'll start off with the df. We'll use the bracket notation. But at this point, we want to specify a bunch of columns. So we could do this. We could do another bracket, another list, and actually specify the columns we want. So let's say we want the prices, we want the brand, and just for the sake of putting, let's say the mileage. So the outside bracket is because we're selecting columns. The inside bracket is because we want to provide a list of the columns we want. So let's do my data just to see what it is. And you notice we grab just the prices, the brand, and the mileage. So again, when you deal with data science, you might want to, you sometimes want to narrow your data down to just the columns you want. You don't need that other information. Now, can you take a guess as to what kind of data type this is? Again, does it look like this, or does it look like this? Again, if you need to figure out, if you can't figure it out just by looking, you can simply do type my data, and it's a data frame. So notice whenever your information looks like this, where it's more than one piece of information, that's a data frame. If it looks like this, that's a series. Again, this is going to become more relevant to you when we actually start doing stuff with machine learning, or gathering information from our data set. All right, so we've been focused a lot on columns. So let's talk about how we can go about getting our rows. So let's go down here. And just for the sake of creating a variable, so we'll say first row. So we can use df. And again, if you remember, Pandas is focused on columns of information. So it's made it very convenient to pull columns worth of information. When it comes to pulling a row, it seems a little more cumbersome. But they do provide a function called iLoc for locate, index locate. And what we can do here is we can do bracket 0. So think of the rows as arrays. And let's just do first row. Okay, so you can see here, it pulls up the first row. Now, just out of curiosity, what kind of data type do you think this is? Now, you might say, well, here's the columns, here are the column names, and here's the actual data. And just to prove to you, this is the first piece of information. If you look up here, this is 6300, the Toyota Cruiser, 2008, and then New Jersey. So this is the first piece of information. So let's see, what kind of information is it? Is it a data frame or is it a series? So let's do first row. Okay, so even though it looks like it has 2 columns worth of information, again, these are just labels. This is the actual information, and it's only one set of information. Happens to be the row. So what else can we do with this? So let's say we want to select a bunch of rows. So let's say top 5. So we're still going to do df. We're going to use iLoc. And again, treat this like a list in Python. And if you're familiar with lists in Python, you know that you can select a bunch of them by simply providing the start point and the end point of the information you want. And let's go ahead and just do that. Let's print it out. Okay, so notice this gave us all the columns for the first 5 pieces of information, which coincidentally, we could have done that with df.head as well. So what is this? Is this a series or is this a data frame? Let's try that. So let's do type top 5. Okay, so it's a data frame. So again, I'm doing this a lot to kind of train your mind in what's a series and what's a data frame. You got to be able to know how to select information, which is what this video is all about. I want to do one more thing that becomes very convenient. So we saw that we can select a bunch of columns by providing all the column names. But what if you had, let's say, 20 columns and you only wanted 19 of them? It would seem very cumbersome to have to list all 19 column names and then just, ignore the one that you don't want. So Pandas gives us an option to drop a column. So let me show you how to do that. Again, because that is very convenient as well. Sometimes you want to drop columns instead of actually specifying the columns you want. So let's say we wanted everything but the prices. So we'll say no prices. So we'll say df, and now we're going to say drop. So we're going to drop something, and what we're going to drop is the price. Now we have to add this extra piece to this. Axis equals 1. And if you look at the IntelliSense pop-up, it says that 1 or columns. So 1 means we want to, prices is a column we want to drop. If we didn't provide this axis equals 1, it's going to assume that we're trying to drop a row, which is not what we want. We want to drop that whole column. And now let's do no prices. Okay, so you can see here, here's our data set minus the prices. Again, very easy way of dropping just a particular column. In a future video, we're going to see how we can select particular rows. Matter of fact, I think it's the next video. Okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's go back to our presentation and let's review what we've done. So we've talked about how information, when we look at it for data science, really kind of gets focused on the columns, not so much on the rows. And there's various ways to select informations by column and also to select information by rows. Again, in future videos, you're going to get a lot of practice at this because this is the basis of data science. So, enjoy.